I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hi, I'm Molly Barrows, a longtime reporter in Florida's Panhandle, and welcome to my investigative series, Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier stories that surface in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf of Mexico. My co-host is Pam Hill. Pam, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And for those who are regular listeners of Gulf Coast Confidential, then you know Pam Hill is certainly my regular co-host, and she has a unique perspective on a lot of the crimes we cover here on Gulf Coast Confidential. Her sister was killed by her son, Pam's nephew, on Christmas Eve of 2013. And as a pharmacist and a grief and loneliness researcher, Pam has a unique perspective on a lot of these cases. In this episode called Inmate Update, Where Are They Now?, we've got updates on several cases we've recently covered here on the Gulf Coast Confidential. And in fact, we've got new information on what's going on with Brandon Aydelott. That's Pam's nephew, who I just mentioned, who's in custody at Florida State Hospital for the criminally insane after he was found not guilty by reason of insanity for brutally stabbing, beating, and stomping his mother, Sharon Aydelott, to death. So, Pam, I know you were at that status hearing, and we're going to talk more about it in a minute, but just in a sentence or two, was there anything earth-shattering that came out of today's hearing today? It was his evaluation.
Yeah. No, it just kind of kicked the can down the road again. It's always something, and it's always about the offender, and Sharon gets lost in the fracas of it. It's just disheartening.
Yeah, disheartening and frustrating, and par for the course.
Yes.
So we'll get more into that. But before we do, we want to update you on some other cases that, like I said, we've been covering. The first is Ron Samuels. For those who may have heard about him before or not, he's the former millionaire, the Pensacola car salesman who made national headlines when he hired drug addicts to kill his ex-wife and her new husband a couple of decades ago. Well, Samuels, 75, has apparently died in prison. He was serving a life sentence at Dade Correctional Institution for the attempted murder of his ex-wife, Heather. And according to the Florida Department of Corrections website, Samuels is listed as out of custody on April 15th of this year and appears to have passed on or around that date. And that, in fact, Pam, was about a week after his 75th birthday, which was on April 7th. And he had been convicted in 2006 of hiring men to shoot and kill his ex-wife, Heather, and her then new husband, Ron Grossman. They were stopped at a traffic light in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida, where they had moved to try and start a new life. And he apparently put a stop to that. They were headed to lunch when two rifle shots were fired from the car next to them. One of those bullets grazed John Grossman's chin. The other left a fist-sized hole in Heather's neck and severed her spinal cord, leaving the then 31-year-old mother of three paralyzed from the neck down. As Pam and I have discussed, she has since struggled not only to survive her physical injuries, but to find the funding she needs for her around-the-clock specialized care. Pam, I just think it's so interesting that the woman he worked so hard and was so relentless about trying to punish and kill outlived him.
Yes, because she's living a good life. She's not doing bad things. If you're doing anything out of love and kindness and doing the right thing, you can do it forever. But when evilness is your direction, you don't last long. I think it's kind of interesting that he died in or around April 15th, doing a tax day.
I thought that too.
Yeah, doing all the flim-flamming and shuck and jive that he was doing. It's almost poetic in a reverse way.
I know, and it's interesting because it's on the Department of Corrections website when you go to find an update on the information, like what the charges that they're in custody for. You get to see their photo ID, their mugshot, and I have to thank an alert listener of Gulf Coast Confidential for alerting me to the fact that it did say deceased. I had pulled his mugshot about this time last year, and I just had it on file on my computer. So when I did a recent update on it, I didn't even go to the Department of Corrections website. It didn't occur to me. Even though he's 75, it didn't cross my mind that he might be imminent. But I mean, I guess we're all imminent. We never know how much time we really have, any of us, for that matter. But at any rate, thank you to that alert viewer and listener, audience member, and for for letting us know about that. But, and certainly my condolences to those who did love Ron Samuels. And there were plenty of people who believed that he was falsely convicted. Those 4 men that that were part of that hired hitman plan, they all testified against him. They all had immunity deals. And there are a lot of people that feel like that maybe even Ron Grossman was behind shooting himself and his new bride. I don't buy any of that. But at any rate, I just want to extend my condolences to those who did love Ron Samuels. But he had been estranged from his children. And I thought that was interesting, too, listening to Heather. He had been ordered to have no contact with them. And over the years, he had continued to try and even was put in isolation. Did the court make sure he got the message that he was not supposed to contact his family? So I would assume, and according to her, he never did reach out to them again. So, all of that angst, all of that hatred, all of that anger that I perceive went on in that case, and it amounted to nothing, him dying alone in a cell.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot with people that if money is your only objective, money doesn't care if you live or die. Money doesn't care if you're happy or sad. He had $30 million and a big old business, but he just could never do the right thing, not even the next right thing.
Yeah, he couldn't let her go. She left him because of allegedly for physical abuse and threatening and in fear for her life and her children's lives. And she did leave him, and it was just as she feared. He pursued, he threatened, he harassed. It just didn't matter where she went. He was right on her heels, tormenting her, bound and determined to make sure she didn't have a happy life. But she did, even though he left her paralyzed. She hung on to her faith. She stayed a good mom. Her second marriage to Ron Grossman, that turned into a nightmare too. But fortunately, she survived that as well, and she's still with us. Right. And so I blessings to her and her family as well.
Yeah. And I think one common thread we're going to see through these, even in the update, we're going to see that these men in all these cases, they can't just let a woman be. They can't just let their family be. It's back to that narcissism, and I almost think we say that word too much, but we are talking about murderers and attempted murderers. And they say, I say it all the time, I'm going to do what I want, how I want it, when I want it, and you're going to like it. That's exactly what happens here. And she did the right things. She had that impending doom. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me.
She told the court that multiple times.
Just like my sister did.
Yeah, just like your sister did. And we've got another case that we're going to update in just a minute that to your point, it's about these men that just won't let some of these women that they perceive as their property apparently or that they're owed somehow, that they need to punish these women for something that they perceive was how they were wrong.
Right.
But just to let you know, Heather Grossman has set up a GoFundMe account. If you would like to support her, she does need a tremendous amount of money to pay for her care, and so that she doesn't have to go into a facility where perhaps the care would not be what she needs to survive. So she's also written a book, if you're interested, about her story called Paralyzed in Paradise, and that's available on Amazon.com. If you'd like to learn more about any of these cases, there are 2 Gulf Coast Confidential episodes that you should check out. One is called Relentless, and the other is called Making Deals. So that's the update on Ron Samuels, and we have another update now, a couple more actually, and this one is on a case that we touched on in a previous episode where it was murder on the clock. It's killing time. And it was about just women who had been killed, going about their business, going about their jobs, being where they were supposed to be, where they thought they would be safe, and instead that they were essentially executed and murdered where they stood. And one of those cases was a young woman that was shot to death in Home Depot by the father of her child. And as we now know, he is charged with killing her, but his mother is also in jail for her contribution. The police found text messages. The Escambia Sheriff's deputies saw the communication between him and the mom before the shooting happened, where she was basically directing him to where she was working as an inventory staffer, if you will, at Home Depot, gave him the aisle number, and it just goes on from there. And so, Pam, I know you have more information about this.
Well, it was Brooklyn Sims. She was 20 years old. I think she was... No, she was 18. Keith Agee was 20, and his mother, Sheila Agee, was 50, old enough to know better. And so I keep reading about how the mother and the son coordinated the murder, and I'm used to families coordinating a wedding maybe, or a business deal or something, and that just struck me. I was like, how ridiculous, how evil. And if I read the text back and forth from her to him and him to her, and they are planning it so much. A lot of it's redacted from certain like reports, but a lot of it isn't. And she's basically taunting him and telling him, because he says that he got an STD from her, from Brooklyn. And that they have a child together, a 2-year-old child together. So he was mad about that, and his mama had geeked him up, Sheila.
I saw some of those texts,
Yeah,
right?
they're awful. And I mean, I can't even believe a grown woman. You don't even have to believe in God to try to do better than that.
Well, and as a mother, I kept thinking, do you not love him? Why
Yeah.
would you encourage him to commit an act that not only takes the life of the mother of your grandchild, but it could potentially put him at risk, even if you didn't care about her, even if you didn't care about your grandchild having both of their parents in the picture? Why would you put your son at risk to go to prison for the rest of his life,
And
or
her
to
too.
face
Yeah.
death penalty?
If she's so dumb she didn't know she's going too, we got a twofer going on right here. You're going right with him. And so she basically told him in one of the texts, if you don't kill her, she said, then you are a MF biatch.
I mean, it's almost like he wasn't even her son. It was like he was a friend. She was treating him almost like a, it was just unbelievable to me. Not how a mother should act,
And
to
it's
say
that
the least.
thuggish, juvenile texting back and forth like Randy did.
Like she's one of the kids.
Yep. All these cases intertwine. That's why it's like a big old gumbo to us, a big old criminal gumbo. And so we see things starting to be the same thing. And so basically, Sheila Agee, 50 years old enough to know better, told Keith she's on aisle 52 in Home Depot. So he goes in there and he shoots at her. They said they heard 5 shots. Home Depot's a big old metal building. Things bang, bang, bang around. He ended up shooting one girl in the hand and another one in the back. So he is charged with first-degree premeditated murder and has 2 battery charges, and she is charged being a principal to first-degree premeditated murder. He has won himself a mandatory minimum of life in prison.
That's right.
And she's probably not far behind, because if they can find all this stuff and put her right there, you get to enjoy the same destination that the primary person does.
That's right. What they plotted to do, now they can suffer the consequences together.
Yeah, they can have a nice time. His docket date is November 28th, and the jury trial is on December the 11th. If I was off, I'd go to both of them. I would.
I don't blame you. Well, it's going to be an interesting case to follow, because it was so shocking and so horrific. And again, she was just going about her life, and it is senseless. And now a child has neither of their parents.
Just an 18-year-old girl going in, working for RGIS, inventory specialist, going to do her job, unbeknownst to her. Can you imagine? Okay, the boyfriend's mad. Big deal. Get over it.
Right.
You don't go killing people because you're mad at them. But then he goes to get this extra geeking from his mama.
I know.
Absolutely horrible.
I know. I agree, Pam. Well, we've got a couple more cases that we want to update you on as well. And this one is about Dr. Charles Stamatolis. He's the Pensacola dentist who faced multiple accusations, over decades, of inappropriately touching patients and staff. And he was convicted recently for touching one of his employees. Well, Stamatolis is now out of the Escambia County Jail on bond after serving 9 months in jail for that misdemeanor battery charge. Stamatolis was behind bars even longer, though, because he had a felony perjury charge related to allegations that he lied to the court about why he violated conditions of his release back in January. So this has been going on for some time, well over a year. He was out on bond essentially while some of these cases were going on, and then they realized that he had lied, that he had gone to Mobile, he was on a monitor, and they realized that he left. And he said, well, he gave him one reason, and the reason was because he went to go buy his wife a car. And at any rate,
That's an emergency.
he had said it was an emergency, and they were like, that's not much of an emergency.
Yeah.
So anyway, he had to stay longer in behind bars. But he was back in court on September 26th, and the judge granted him a $15,000 bond. Not only is he now out on bond, but he was also granted permission by the court to travel out of state to a niece's wedding. And so, Pam, I'm hearing from some of the victims, some of his alleged victims, who are scared of him. They're concerned.
They should be. He ruled the house up there at the dentist's office. Now he's out in the wild like a terrorist. And so he's going to try to rule wherever he is, and he's going to get them back. Just like this mama, 50-year-old mama, this 70-something-year-old man, or however old he is.
Well, and for those who aren't familiar, there's a couple of episodes that you'll want to check out. And Armed to the Teeth is one of them, and the other one is Nothing to Smile About. And both of those are episodes that really outline a lot of the details, because this is not, when you see a charge like misdemeanor battery, it doesn't even begin to paint the picture of just the string of allegations that go back, again, decades. So it was about 20 years ago, I was reporting in the area when several women came forward saying that he had inappropriately touched them, whether they were, employees or staff. There were a couple of lawsuits that were settled in court related to it, but no charges ever stuck. And then similar charges began to resurface beginning of last year, and that's what he ended up serving the 9 months in jail, was for inappropriately touching a 20-year-old girl who had been a patient and then went to work for him and hadn't been on the job any time at all. Caroline West, who has now filed a civil suit against him.
Good.
Absolutely, for just pain and suffering and the mental anguish and that sort of thing. Because it was her first job. It was her first big girl job, trying to join the workforce, and he'd cornered her in a bathroom and just was completely inappropriate and scared her. But it is accusation after accusation after accusation. Doesn't matter the age of the woman. There were accusations that he gassed them. Patients and staff said that that patients would wake up and couldn't remember and had trouble with their memory. There was a rape charge he was not charged with that. But when you read the report, and I actually spoke to the woman who filed the charge, she said that essentially it didn't hold up because there was a delay in reporting. She had been scared, and a woman who had been with her, essentially, she was cleaning his office. He cornered her when she was alone, she said. And then there was a woman who was supposed to be helping her who had been out getting cleaning supplies because that's what Stamatolis wanted her to do. So he would be alone with the first woman. And so when she got back, apparently, she realized that her friend was upset and that this terrible thing had happened, or she said this terrible thing had happened. But then she later denied that she really knew much about it and didn't support it. And so basically the deputy felt like there wasn't the evidence that he needed and to make the charge stick. But I say all that to say this. It may say misdemeanor battery charge, and according to the court and the state attorney's office, he has served his time in jail. But there are so many more allegations and of just descriptions of unsettling, frightening, consistently retaliatory behavior on the part of this man over and over and over again, who does not like to take no for an answer. Everything from the weapons that he possesses to the trespass warnings he's been given at a local car dealership to, businesses are concerned about him. Other dentists in the community have been concerned about him.
Yeah.
They have felt like he targeted them. So not everybody wanted to press charges. There was a woman that worked next door to his dental office in Pensacola who said he stalked her for simply complaining that his employees were parking in her parking spaces.
Yeah.
And then she was so concerned and scared that he would retaliate against her, she didn't want to press charges anymore when she saw all the women coming forward last year to press charges about the inappropriate touching. And she probably felt like, well, I don't need to hold my case in court. This is stressful on me. These other charges will take care of it. Well, he's out now.
Yeah, right. And never assume that someone else is going to do the heavy lifting. I am the kind of person, and my dad taught me this. My dad said, if you are leveling a charge against someone, and I think I've shown you this before, my dad's like, be brave enough to go, I'm talking about you. Or
Absolutely.
don't say it. So the thing is, nobody else is going to do your heavy lifting. I have learned that from this with Sharon's murder. And I've never depended on anybody else to do it, but I was an amateur at it. I'm not a professional now, but I have learned a whole lot more. And what kind of help do you have when you call the police and stuff, and then the owner of the business, 6 foot tall, 200 and something pounds, carrying a gun, got way more money than you got, and then everybody, normal people, light store owners, nurse practitioner, car dealers, regular little ladies, patients are saying he did this, and everybody's like, no, he didn't. Yes, he did.
Yeah, well, and that's what's interesting, too, because one of the biggest naysayers or his defender is his wife, Faye. And she is also named in the lawsuit that Caroline West, the civil lawsuit that she filed against them, because she said his wife was fully aware. And that I heard from alleged victim after alleged victim. She was, because she worked in the office with him. And so there was just, like I said, if you want to learn more about it, there's a couple episodes you need to check out. It's a very layered, very detailed, very frightening story when you really get into the details. whether or not somebody's charged, there's that old saying where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, there are a lot of charges. There are a lot of accusations that are very similar, even if there aren't necessarily the flames of a charge. There's a lot of smoke of accusations.
Well, and these ladies and people that were brave enough, and I cannot tell you how proud I am of Caroline. 20-year-old girl was the one, awful. The 20-year-old, the, what do we call it, millennial, whatever, maybe Gen X, I don't know what
I don't know anymore either,
the little cuties. I mean, she's like, no, but she was scared. I'm sure she threw up. I'm sure she didn't sleep. I'm sure she's had a lot of misery and just horribleness over this. She's 20.
I know, and you think about it as a grown woman, it's uncomfortable enough dealing with something that's inappropriate, but as a young woman, you have no life experience, you're less helpless, and women, I think, often naturally are people pleasers, and so you second guess, well, was that inappropriate? Should I be uncomfortable? Should I say something? And in this case, he was overtly inappropriate, so there's no question about it.
You know what I say, no means no.
Absolutely.
No means no. Leave me alone means leave me alone. Or if you're a professional, you shouldn't be doing that. As an employer, your employees are entitled to a hostile-free, harassment-free workplace. Probably going to get his pantsuit off.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll have to follow that case and see how it turns out. But his next criminal court date is set for October 30th. Stamatolis has pleaded no contest to 4 charges that he inappropriately touched 3 of his patients. That was in January, and he was sentenced to 8 more months in jail for that, 60 days in jail for each charge. But that sentence was actually served concurrently to that misdemeanor charge he was convicted of in October of last year. So Dr. Stamatolis, like I said, still faces that civil lawsuit filed by Caroline West, and she's seeking over $100,000 in damages from him and his wife, Faye. And then the Florida Board of Dentistry also revoked Charles Stamatolis' dental license in March. So I do want to mention that. So he is no longer allowed to operate, work as a dentist.
On men or women. Remember, for a little while there, they let him work on men.
That's right. That's right. And if you want to learn more about that and a lot of these other accusations, Armed to the Teeth and Nothing to Smile About are the other episodes that we've done on that. And now we're going to get to Brandon Aydelott. And of course, you and I both know a lot about this case. None more so than you, though. You've lived it. It was your family. Sharon Aydelott, 48 years old, popular middle school science teacher in the Pensacola area. She lived in Gulf Breeze in the Florida Panhandle, taught at a little town called Navarre. You might have heard of Navarre Beach. We have beautiful beaches here along the Gulf Coast.
We do.
And Sharon loved it, and she loved raising her family in this community, and she thought she was in a very family-oriented community, and certainly loved her school environment there at Navarre Primary, and loved living in Gulf Breeze. But I think she was concerned that looking back, that perhaps that privileged lifestyle that her son had tainted him and poisoned him, along with the corrupt input, if you will, from her ex-husband, Randy Aydelott, Brandon's father, who was very bitter by all accounts over the divorce. And we know it's a horrendous story from the beginning. There's so much wrong about this case. But again, Pam and I have done multiple episodes on it. Mommy Killer 1 and 2, Secrets in the School, Secrets in the Field House. Those are other episodes if you want to check out more about this case. It's a very complicated case as well. But basically, Randy Aydelott, Brandon's dad, Sharon's ex-husband, was fired from Pensacola High School as a coach and a science teacher for trying to have an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl in his science class, who actually was in the same class with his son, Brandon. He had taken Brandon out of the school that he had been in for a long time in Gulf Breeze to take with him to Pensacola High School. And now looking back, you are suspicious that maybe he wanted Brandon there to be a beard, to be a cover for him.
I kind of thought that anyway. I remember Sharon calling me because I worked over in Gulf Breeze. I don't live over there, but I worked over there so I could be close to Sharon and help her with her kids, because Brandon was pushing back, Randy wasn't helping, and I just would want to help her. So, Sharon called me and said, Randy's trying to take Brandon out of Gulf Breeze. They moved over there because they're A-rated schools. It is a wonderful community. And it is, if you want better things, there's good athletic teams and a big rec center. It's beautiful. It's right there near the beach. It's the good life.
Right. And it was close to her job in Navarre, which was further down the road.
Exactly. So he wants to take Brandon. Brandon's going to have to get up early every morning, go ride with him over to PHS, which is back in Pensacola. And it wasn't the academic trajectory Sharon wanted for him. He over at Gulf Breeze. So I thought, well, what is he doing? And I remember that she called me and said, come talk to him with me. And I remember I was talking to Randy, and I said, so why do you want to move him over there? He said, because it's that smart people school over there. It does have a international baccalaureate program.
Right, the
But
IB
Brandon
program.
wasn't in it. And I said, well, which one? He said, you know, that smart one, like that. And I was like, yeah, I do know, Randy, and Brandon's not in it. But when Randy never can do anything by himself, he was so inappropriately close. It was just weird with Brandon. He could never let Brandon be gone. If Sharon and him were going to go on a date, he would always bring Brandon. And even the psychologist, because Sharon would get up at 5 in the morning to go to a psychologist, and Randy wouldn't go with her. That was back over in Pensacola. But the psychologist told him, when he did talk to him, take just her on a date. But he made sure to bring Brandon again.
So it wasn't a very sincere effort, but
No.
it was that incident at Pensacola High School where he gets caught, and there's a lot to it. Again, you need to check out Confessions
Yes.
in the Field House. But he was the Pensacola Police Department investigated, but the detective that they assigned to the case was basically president of the football booster club at PHS. Her son played football for these guys. They all met. She and the principal at the time, David Williams, who's now on the Escambia County School Board, as well as another coach, Mike Bennett, and Randy. And Tarlonda Gooden, the detective at the time, who's no longer with the Pensacola Police Department. But they all met in the field house to discuss how these accusations came to light. And it's because this girl had lost her phone. Other students had found it. They had seen this inappropriate texting between Randy Aydelott and the student, and they had called him, and he claimed that they were trying to hustle money from him in order to get the phone. And they were basically saying, no, it was a reward. We were trying to, telling him that he was a pervert and he was, nasty for doing what he was doing. And anyway, long story short, he ends up losing his job, but he was never criminally charged. And it ended up being the result of all of this is he left the family. There was a domestic violence incident where he kind of lost his mind, if you will, and he was beating his head against the wall, creating holes in the sheetrock and waving a gun around as he was packing to leave the house when Sharon confronted him about these texts that when she became aware of them, because again, there's much more to it. We won't get into all of it. There are other episodes where you can learn more about some of these details. But in a nutshell, the weekend that these accusations were discovered that ultimately led to him losing his job, that led to this domestic violence incident, that led to the family falling apart, you believe that all of this really contributed. This was just a few years before Brandon had his mental break.
Right.
He was diagnosed by one doctor as having a schizophrenic breakdown, having schizophrenia. But, which is he in that age group, it would be understandable. But he was also using drugs at the time. He was also living with his dad at the time, who was angry over this split, even though he's the one that left, even though he's the one that cleaned up the bank account, even though he's the one that filed for divorce. Sharon, I don't think, was sorry that any of that happened necessarily. She was not happy about the bank account being cleaned out. She was not happy that he had done what he had done. Certainly not with that student. She was the only one trying to protect that girl. But all of that, I think, really, in your mind, and certainly anybody looking from the outside in would wonder, did this contribute to Brandon's mental state in order for him to do what he did with Sharon on Christmas Eve of 2013?
Right. Of course, I think so. This happened, all this with him trying to sext and have an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl was found out on 10/10/10, easy day to remember, and it was Columbus Day. I remember all that being something because Randy cleared out the bank account except for 77 cents, and I told Sharon, so what? Let him have the money. Just get him gone, And so Brandon hated Randy at this time. He hated him because the little girl was in his class. Think about that. Your big old daddy up there trying to get with a girl that sits next to you.
And the whole class was talking about it. The whole school was talking about it, especially after he got booted.
Oh, yeah. And they were whispering and gossiping. And so Brandon got so sick, he lost 14 pounds and burned up in his esophagus. So he had to have surgery. But also, during that time, Randy still kept denying it and trying to blame it on Brandon, saying Brandon's the one that sent those 88 texts on a Sunday and the other 250 during the week. It was just 7 or 8, 9 days maybe. He was sending. Randy should have been arrested. Randy should have been arrested and for grooming and for those sexting. But the Tarlonda, this is what I'm so upset about. Tarlonda, the policewoman, she obviously has a conflict of interest. Nobody wanted to do the right thing. Sharon had to confront all the coaches, Mr. Williams. When she confronted Mr. Williams and said, I want to know what y'all talked about at that secret meeting on Sunday.
Because Randy told her about it.
Right. And he said, we didn't have one. Sharon said, well, I know that's a lie because he that can't tell the truth right here even just told me he did. And Mr. Williams was preening his tie and stretching, doing all that. And Sharon said, yes, you did. So he had told her to meet him in the office another time, and he just waved her through because he didn't want her to swipe her badge. But she was smarter than that. She said, Pam, I swiped my badge to prove it. Something's wrong here.
So there was a record of her going to talk to
Yes.
him so she could say, I went to go talk to him.
But they got together. They weren't necessarily talking about the charges. They're like, how are we gonna hide
quiet.
this? Because Randy just said, oh, Sharon, they told me just to lay low, it'll blow over. Mr. Williams and Coach Bennett will have them expelled.
For extortion. They wanted to go after the girls. And Tarlonda Gooden, who I did ask about that, even I made multiple attempts to reach out to David Williams when he was still principal at PHS. He never returned any of my phone calls. He didn't return any of my emails. I do intend to ask him again because I do see him now when I'm reporting and covering on a Escambia County business. He is on a number of he's on the Escambia County School Board. He's also on other county-related boards. So I think it might be easier to have a face-to-face conversation than it is when he's not, apparently has a little bit of difficulty returning calls on these subjects. But Tarlonda Gooden did confirm for me that meeting in the field house did happen.
It did.
So she did say that did happen, that they were all there. She said that it was presented to her like these students were doing something wrong to Randy, that
They're
they
little
were
girls.
trying to, I know. So, but that was the whole spin. That's why they were saying Randy was feeling comfortable because they were going to go after the girls and say they were trying to extort them. But at any rate, so it's a very sordid tale, and we bring it all up to the state. So Brandon was arrested after he heinously killed his mom unexpectedly. Nobody saw it coming that he was going to do something like that. However, in the weeks and months leading up to her death, he had been behaving strangely. He'd been sending bizarre texts. He'd been not himself. He was emotionless in many ways. He was, just exhibiting. He was angry. He was unexpectedly violent. He was not making sense. Some of this was information Sharon had herself. She saw him firsthand. She heard it from some other students. Some of this information came out later after her death when the investigators were looking through his phone and realized he'd been sending bizarre texts to a girl that he liked, but that Sharon had not been made aware of that, which was tragic. But at any rate, she did know something was wrong with her son, and she had worked hard to get a family intervention going that Randy was actually supposed to head up and get Brandon into a drug rehab program. And they did. 2 weeks before he killed her, they got him into this program. He didn't test positive for drugs, which they didn't test for synthetic drugs. And you suspect that he was taking spice. Randy and Sharon both suspected it as well. Sprayed with all kinds of chemicals that can cause people to have symptoms that do imitate schizophrenia, only they don't respond to antipsychotic medication as well. So at any rate, he was taken to this rehab facility, but Randy checked him out less than 48 hours later, claiming, well, insurance isn't going to pay for it. And you and Sharon both stepped up and said you would pay for it, that please don't take him out. And he took him out anyway because he said he had to play baseball. So, at any rate, it was an unexpected, horrible crime. 2 weeks before, she's trying to get him help. He's coming over to her house Christmas Eve to go to a family party and enjoy a Christmas Eve service with Sharon and his 10-year-old sister. Randy's out with a last-minute shopping trip with Biz, the daughter, to get a last-minute gift for Sharon, so he claimed. And then they're the ones that find her body because Brandon showed up with a knife hidden in his sleeve. He said he wanted, the voices in his head told him to kill his mom, and the voices included his dad's voice. They were out shopping. He decided to leave and go kill his mother at her house where she was waiting for him. And he said that he couldn't find a gun, so he grabbed a knife out of his dad's kitchen, put it in the car seat next to him, drove the few miles to her house, hid the knife up his sleeve, and started stabbing her basically as soon as she opened the door. And it was very brutal. He not only stabbed her, he used multiple knives. He broke off knives in her eye socket. They had to use orthopedic surgical tools to remove one of the knives because it was lodged in her skull. Pieces of her jaw were found across the room. He used his favorite baseball bat on her. His van shoe prints were found on her face. He had stomped her face, and he had grabbed a Sprite out of the refrigerator to top it all off on the way back. And when he was eventually arrested, and he told investigators, I did the right thing. I killed Sharon Hill. And they said, well, who's Sharon Hill? And he said, well, that's my mom, essentially is what he was saying. But it's interesting. So there's a lot to this. Pam and I have been working on this for a long time, and we are going to have a book that comes out about it, and you can read it all in one place. But in the meantime, like I said, there's plenty of other episodes where we talk about all this. But Brandon was eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity. It took several years for him to be found competent to stand trial because one of the doctors found that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced, basically put into the custody of the Department of Children and Families at Florida State Prison for the criminally insane, where he worked his way up through the system, because once you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're technically not guilty of a crime in the eyes of the law, and it's just a matter of, do you meet the criteria to remain in custody of the Department of Children and Families for this treatment? And so Brandon has been there for a number of years now. And last year around this time, the Department of Children and Families counselors there at Florida State Hospital felt that he was starting to improve to the point where they wanted to recommend him for release to a group home, which was outrageous to you because you had no idea that when he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, that his case would come up for evaluation every 6 months to determine if he still met that criteria to remain in custody for the criminally insane in that particular program at Florida State Hospital. And today was one of those 6-month evaluations. And here we are about a year after they first said he was trending towards a release. I've heard it from the state attorney's office. They've also been in touch with the counselors. But since then, they have not found that he's ready to get out. They are keeping him there. And then today, we don't really know what their latest report is because it wasn't even ready when you went to the hearing.
Right. They were, the Department of Children and Family and the Florida State Hospital were ordered to have that here by this date. And they didn't do it. Just like every other time they've been ordered to do something, they don't do it, or they don't show up, or they giggle and laugh about it. You know, I'm tired of everybody giggling and laughing about my sister's murder. I'm tired of them acting like Sharon's the cost of doing business for Brandon to get well. And the reason I that's such a shock to me, is they never said not guilty by reason of insanity. Bill Edens and were just saying the insanity defense. They didn't tell me that in our state, there's not a guilty by reason of insanity. That's one law I want to help to get changed. If there's not guilty by reason of insanity, there should be guilty. He admitted he killed Sharon. He said he did the right thing. He even told us how he did it. And he even told us when he did. I mean, all of it. But also, Bill Edens told us he will never get out.
And that was the state attorney at the time for District 1.
Right. So why would I not believe him? And why does this creative talking? This is my sister. And so today, that's why I'm kind of numb right now. That all happened. This other little meeting we just had, I call it a meeting because it's not a hearing, because they don't even have the information there. And so who are the Department of Children and Family to decide that? They're not the judge. They're not forensic people. They're psychologists that don't even know what Brandon did. They send me letters all the time saying my son is doing this and that. He's not my son. And they just have it so wrong. It's just to move him out of the system, just to move him along. He's on, 20-something-year-old boy, closer to 30, a big old boy. They don't want him in the system, and they can mark a little mark on their chart that they did good and move someone that no one walks alone. Sharon walks nowhere. She's dead. And so I just really get upset about it. And I don't even know how I'm acting. I may be coming across crazy right now, but I don't know how I feel. I'm numb. I sat there and watched that ridiculousness. I mean, our court system, the best place to be if you're a criminal is in court. And it's the worst place to be if you're a victim.
Especially when you're trying to move on and heal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a resolution to be found not guilty by reason of insanity when every 6 months it's brought back up. When every 6 months you've got to wonder, is he going to get out? Is this justice? Is this what justice looks like for my sister?
Right. And justice is the pursuit also. And mercy on him. Being in the hospital is that's a gift. He should be in big boy prison. He really should, because he killed his mother, and it was so savage. The people in Santa Rosa County said that's made grown men with all kind of experience sick to see that it was horrible.
Yes, we talked to one of the first officers on the scene, and he said that he, and to his credit, many first responders, whether it's firefighters or law enforcement, do suffer from PTSD just from the horrible things that they see during the course of their job. And he said that absolutely was one of the worst things that he had ever seen, and he'd never forgotten it.
Right. And then on top of that, Brandon's told us, I'm not through killing my family, and I'm got a hit list. We knew he had a hit list because he went to the boys' house after he killed Sharon. He was going to go to the boys' house right there in Grand Point in Gulf Breeze. Thank God he wasn't home. It was Christmas Eve and he was at a family member's house because he was going to kill him too and 2 other boys because they have brown eyes. So he's promised to keep killing. Of course you got to be insane to kill your mother, but it took them 3 years to get competency for him. And competency is basically just say, that's the judge, that's your lawyer, here's what you're being charged with. And then all of a sudden he has this remarkable boomerang that he's all right to get out with us. Do you realize, basically Sharon told him no, behave, just do the right thing. She wouldn't
do
let
your
him.
chores,
Right.
stay on top of your grades.
Right. It
he was
wasn't,
letting his grades slide.
Feed the dogs.
Right.
I mean, and he started
Take out
being
the
ugly
trash.
to the dogs too, so.
Ugly to his friends. He'd hit one.
yeah.
He'd hit a teammate.
Yeah, and disrespectful to coaches and stuff. And poor little Sharon, it's the story. I keep these papers here. This is part of the DVI stuff right here. This
The
is
domestic
just
violence
DVI.
injunction.
Yeah, this is Sharon and me together. So, and also some Board of Education stuff about Randy. But, little woman standing there having to fight it all by herself and they make this hard. I don't know why they make this hard. And then when someone breaks the restraining order, they minimize you and mock you and carry on, which happened to my sister 2 different times.
And she was strong enough to stand up. And the sheriff at the time, Sheriff David Morgan, found that she was right. He sustained her complaint against the deputy who took her complaint because he minimized her and dismissed her. And he said, when she complained about it, he took a look at the case and he said, you're absolutely right. He did do that.
Yeah.
And he was given basically training to address it.
He got progressive discipline. So I have an issue with this person, and I will go talk to him because you're not doing that to my sister, and I'm going to go talk to Chip Simmons too. They need to do better. Women shouldn't have to stand there by themselves with the people saying, oh, well, I don't think that's important, and I hate women, and my wife's a biatch, and this, that, and the other, so I'm going to take it out on you. That's not professional. I'm tired of everybody in this system being unprofessional.
Right, and it's difficult. Like I said, when you're trying to move on, when you're just trying to get a handle on your life and grieving the loss of your sister and the loss of the whole family. The family split apart. I mean, it was loss after loss. Yeah. Your dad suffered a massive heart attack not long after, a stroke not long after Sharon passed. Your mom died about a year later. Randy was being difficult with access to her youngest child, who was just 10 years old at the time, Elizabeth, who's now 18 and expecting her own child. Yeah. And you're basically estranged from her too because there's just Randy went through her money financially. There's the documentation to prove that there was some financial abuse there. Not to mention just whatever she had to endure by living in the same house where her brother killed her mom.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Again, be sure to check out Mommy Killer 1 and 2.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff in there. And, the fact that Randy basically was a good old fundraiser for him. Because
he was the pity party in Gulf Breeze where there's a lot of wealth.
Well, he mealy-mouthed everything. He even rooked a church into helping and acting like she doesn't have family. She has family. Randy estranged her from every single person on her mother's side. And I'm talking about alienation. I'm talking about where he's badmouthed me to psychologists, and I've even gotten threatening letters from her. I'll deal with her, too, in the future. But and I've documented that, and I reported her to the Department of Health, and that she had done this to other families, too. And they kind of just neglected it. But I have all my paperwork, and I will file that again.
Well, and it's tough, I think, and this is another reason why I think we talk a lot about, obviously, your sister's case because it's personal, it's still ongoing, and it's something that you have firsthand experience about what it's like to work within the criminal justice system. But this process impacts so many people, whether it's a terrible capital crime like murder or if it's just, lesser crimes. And I don't say lesser because of the impact, but just the penalties. But everything from domestic violence to petty theft, where any kind of crime that can potentially cause a trauma or force you to deal with the process, it's much more confusing than the average person might realize. Right. You'd never dealt with the process before when your sister was killed. You never dealt with having to file a domestic violence injunction before. So when you walk in blind to a lot of these experiences, it's par for the course for a lot of the people that are doing the work, whether it's the attorneys or the law enforcement officers. And a lot of people, whether they're flipping burgers at McDonald's or they're answering domestic violence calls, sometimes work becomes routine. Yeah. And the consequences are greater if your routine work is impacting people's lives in a criminal sense,
Right.
if you will. If you're investigating a crime, or if you're prosecuting a crime, or if you're defending a crime, if you're counseling someone who's, involved in something like this, if you're not bringing your game, it's hard for the people this is their life. This thing that's happened is the most important thing that's happened to them. For a lot of these professionals, it is just one of hundreds of cases that they deal with.
Right.
And I get that can make you apathetic. I can get that can give you burnout. But to the people who are being represented and these are not just case files, this is their life. And it's so difficult to not feel like somebody's 100% in with you.
Well, I'll tell you, Sharon, who she did love and who she was just so grateful to was the ladies at the courthouse where she would have to go ask these questions. She ain't never filled that out. Nobody in my family's filled out all this stuff. And they helped her. They were patient with her. They could see she was upset, trembling, shaking. They knew Randy because he was down there every other day filing something on Sharon, threatening to take Brandon away from her, saying all kind of wrong stuff. And even I've dealt with that now with the judge when Randy went and got a fraudulent loan on Biz's house. I sat there and told Judge Goodman that he had done that, and the judge basically told me, "Hey, don't worry about it. It's going to cost you about $18,000 to prosecute him." I'm like, I just told you. Why do I have to spend any money?
Right. Happened on his watch. You're asking him to do something about it, and he's putting it right back on you.
Half of this is letters to Judge Goodman, and he's chosen not to answer me.
He was the judge that oversaw Biz's welfare basically while she was still a minor.
That did not make sure she had proper welfare. These are to him. I've written him 2 letters with 47 pages of documentation of not just me doing it, actual papers of people that, this right here is something on Randy that's from Ohio, tells you how to not be a teacher. It's got his name in there.
Right. There's a school district in Ohio that used Randy Aydelott's sexting incident as an example of what not to do when you're a teacher. It's just
They call it the old Randy Aydelott case, or that approach. But
you were trying to make the judge aware of all this so that he could take that into account when he's allowing Randy, Biz's father, which it's understandable because he's related to her. But when you have these accusations in the past, when you have these investigations, when you do have proof that there's been financial abuse, and he was removed as financial guardian, but it was given to his brother and sister, and there was no guarantee.
No.
And clearly, to your point, when you've given him all this information and you don't barely even get a reaction and no reaction the second time, it's hard to trust that they're really looking out for your loved one's best interests.
He's not. I will say that he took my other sister and I when we were coming about this. Before him, there was a lawyer named Jennifer Bushnell that was supposed to be Biz's lawyer, but she's there representing Randy with her own security because she's afraid of Randy, and I'm sure they're billing my niece about it. But the judge takes us in chambers because he doesn't want that, I guess, on the record. I go in his office and it looks like something from Disneyland souvenir shop. And I thought, this isn't professional. And he didn't want to hear anything. He kept scolding my sister and I because we were asking him to hold Randy to what he had set orders for him. He just
get a job because Randy wasn't employed for years.
Quit living off of Biz. He never enforced anything that he asked Randy to do in the paperwork that I have.
And this is just one of the many issues that have come up with this case. This is not just about the death and the heinous killing of Sharon Aydelott. This is about all the circumstances, all the failures in the processes, all the bizarre incidents that happened that led up to this terrible thing. And really, any number of people along the way could have taken steps, whether it was to help Sharon when she was looking into these allegations of Randy having an inappropriate relationship with this 14-year-old. She was saying they're trying to help him cover it up at the school, and nobody listened to her. Not the school district, not the police department. And people are listening now because hindsight's 2020 to a certain extent. But at the time, if anyone had just, and I think to your point, you feel like if anyone had just stepped up and done the right thing, done their job. And that's not to say, by the way, that there aren't lots of professionals, whether it's law enforcement, attorneys, prosecutors, defense, whatever, who do fight tooth and nail, who do stay up all night and sleep on the floor in order to protect and represent their clients. Educators is the same way. Thank goodness that there are people that do look out and try to do the right thing and protect the people that they serve. But in this case, you felt like all these professionals along the way could have done more more, should have done more,
Yeah.
but for various reasons,
Yeah.
because it was to protect their own booties or to
Right.
keep things quiet, they just didn't
Right.
do it.
And it's not like I just felt it. I approached them. I told them, I don't feel like you've got my niece's best interest. Even her guardian ad litem, who is an attorney, basically told me and my sister and you, basically, that other guardian ad litems are basically 50-year-old women in Mercedes, and judges are tired of them.
Right.
You know, and he had all kind of other stuff. He basically told me one of the other lawyers didn't do anything because Biz was a honeypot. You know, and I mean, these people are telling me this, and then all that's one thing. That's just stuff, but it's what kept on. And after my other sister, Patricia, says, after Brandon killed Sharon with all those knives, I feel like the system picked him up and now is killing us because we're dealing with all this now. Biz is a person, that is my sister's baby. She's 20 years old and pregnant now. Due any moment now. She should be in her second year of college at Auburn, Sanford, somewhere, just being a little girl, not raising her daddy, not raising other men, not taking care of everything else. She should be able to live her life, but she hasn't been able to since her mother was murdered.
She's a motherless child. Well, Pam, when is his next court date?
It's going to be January 4th. We go with this again, and that will be at 1:30.
All right. Brandon Aydelott back in court, 1:30, January 4th. In Santa Rosa County Court. Well, I appreciate the update on that. And is there anything else that you want to add about this before we wrap it up?
I do want to say that in these fields, I know there are people that do the right thing. My experience has been with this bunch, and I do not cast aspersions on anybody else. That's why I'm so shocked. I've never dealt with people. To get this many corrupt people together that are professionals is really systemic, and it really disturbs me because most of these professionals in these careers are good.
And that's why it's important to speak out when we have concerns, when we
Right.
have problems, so it doesn't happen to other people. Well, Pam, as always, thank you for joining me, and thank you for sharing your story and Sharon's story.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for Inmate Update, Where Are They Now? Here on Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And of course, a big thanks, as always, to director, editor, and production engineer James Roy. Remember, you can listen to more of Gulf Coast Confidential wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And if you like it, be sure to leave us a review. You can also watch on my Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a comment there as well. Thanks so much for joining us.